Good morning, everyone. How are you all? Awesome. I guess your first question is, what is it that I do? Or maybe what is property? So, I mean, intrinsically, the fund that this working. Yes, okay. The fund that I'm involved in, we own considerable amounts of property covering not necessarily residential, because I think there's a misconception that property is purely houses. And I think this debate becomes quite critical, especially when you cover the land issue, because on an economic development perspective, we can only really develop as a country and in knowing where we come from when we discuss land and property. So, in essence, I head up a property fund, which is a real estate investment trust, and we invest into retail assets, so shopping centers, office buildings, similar to the one that we're in, together with industrial property. What we intrinsically do is provide a vehicle whereby individuals can access. As an individual, you're probably more likely in your lifetime own a house, hopefully. But I think over the longer term, it's giving you a vehicle with which to access exposure to buildings that are in the Sandton CBD, shopping centers like Sandton City and the like, and industrial properties, which of course are very instrumental to development of South Africa. So that's in essence what a property fund does, and then that's listed on the JSE, and people can then buy shares in respect of those funds.
So I'm the Deputy Director for Space Science and Technology at the Department of Science and Technology. And we are basically in charge of the National Space Program and oversee the work done by the National Space Agency of South Africa. Many people don't know that exists, but it does, and it's been in existence actually for a few years now. And my responsibility is on industry development, human capital development, mostly. So programs at universities, as well as programs to get the young engineers into industry. It's very cold and it is very stinky of testosterone. Every single, I think I'm always surprised when I'm in a meeting and there's one other lady in the room that is not there to take minutes, for instance. So in the office, no, but the thing is, in the office, that's what people, well, not in the office, but outside, people expect you to be that. They don't think that you can be young, black, talented, and young, black, and be talented and be educated to a certain extent. So yeah, it's quite cold, but it's great, and I mean, I think it's good to have me there. I do have colleagues, but we're not doing the same type of work. Mine is strictly in the engineering part of the space science and technology, whereas my other colleagues are working in the applications. But within my immediate team, I'm the only lady.
There's been a recent discussion around the sectors, especially the entertainment industry, which has much more visibility. We're hearing about certain challenges that women are facing that are unfair, that shouldn't be there, and the way that they should be represented. And when we talk about sport, specifically, I'm going to come to you. When you talk about sport, let me ask the audience, is the first thing you think about sport, do you think about women? Which is the last female sport you watched on TV? Cricket? South Africa's cricket team did much better than our men's. Anyway, so the discussion around sport, Fikiswa, as I mentioned that you've just been elected, of course, as the NBA Africa marketing lead. After working at Mmaphuti Morule, Nike as brand manager for sportswear in Africa, sports and women, what are the stereotypes? Do you have any challenges at all?
So I'm currently working at the NBA in Africa. I've been there for 5 months. I think what I've seen while I'm working there is that in terms of how we run things, here you need to do a lot of work with girls actually, which is really awesome because you go to programs and it's not just boys playing basketball, it's a boys league, it's a girls league. I think people make a lot of assumptions and stuff. Maybe maybe in South Africa we've grown up where you don't see a lot of women's sport being broadcast on TV, or that you're not encouraged to go watch a women's game. But I think obviously that's something that I'm in this new space getting to experience a lot, and I think I appreciate that in terms of you've got a women's league, you've got a men's league, you are constantly going to events where it's not just about the men. So I think it's advancing a lot, but it depends on the different industries and the different sports as well. Because I don't know when last somebody even met a girl who plays rugby, for example. So I think it's
it's not a social like norm at the moment, but I think there's room for it to grow. And obviously, there's different people working the different roles to help drive that.
I don't know if this is working.
Mics.
Oh, okay. Can everybody hear me? So in that aspect, I mentioned the stereotypes when it comes to sports, and you said that there's abilities and all those kind of things, but there's still the mentality and the ideology, the mainframes and all these systems we need to break down. So as anyone listening here, where does a woman start when they want to get involved in the marketing aspect of the sport itself?
I think one should look at it as, if you're talking about corporate spaces, let's say, right? So there's the sport of it. Obviously, as somebody who's a marketer, I look at it more as the brand and the platform that it creates for the job that I have. So I've gone from working in sportswear, that's when I was working in sneakers all the time. As a woman who came with sneakers, I was working with people who didn't maybe believe in me as somebody to be talking sneakers or trying to communicate sneakers to people, especially when you come from working in finance before. They were like, what the hell do you know about this thing? You want to come work at Nike? Yeah, right. You know what I mean? But you got to go in there and say, what are the challenges that I'm going after? What do I want to learn from this role? And I wouldn't be here if somebody didn't believe that I could do this, right? Because they have to, especially within a corporate, the person who hires you, they're going to report somebody else. I mean, they can't just hire an idiot to come and work there really, you know what I mean? So you got to kind of realize that you're there for a reason. What are you kind of there to change? And I think that obviously I'm in a space now where it's working with a sport that most people look at as a male-dominated sport. I mean, it is, but I think because I know all the work that happens in the women's space, and then I think it's amazing. And you kind of have to figure out how can you introduce more people to this, and how can you get them to have a passion for it, right? And sometimes you got to start with the basics of, did you even know that there is women playing basketball, you know? And then you can go to the next step, but you can't just start at a high level and assume everyone's just going to buy into this thing.
So it will be establishing value.
100%, yeah.
All right, cool. And Fikiswa, as I mentioned, you work in the science and technology environment, and you work specifically with space as well, technology. I recently read an article, it's not uncommon, another article of a very prestigious PhD scientist. It had many different people it educated. And those women came out and said that they climbed Mount Everest with it. They experienced some of the worst type of sexual harassment. They experienced some of the worst type of battering, violent, emotional trauma. Some of the worst things that they've ever told. And this comes from their teachers, a lecturer, someone you trust. You've entrusted this person with your future, basically. What would you say the environment is within the science technology? Is there that level of abuse in our current situation?
Absolutely. I think I'm lucky that where I work in a government department, and we have programs and interventions to discuss and address these things. But the moment you're out there, you definitely get people, making remarks and things. But there's definitely that harassment, whether it's, as they mentioned earlier, people think you can't be smart and pretty at the same time. But yes, sexual harassment is a very big problem out there, and I don't think that it is specific to science or space science sector, but it is. There's quite a lot of it within our field because there's so few women. And I think the challenge there is that people, since majority of the people will be men, they kind of they ignore it. It's like, yes, sexual harassment, yes, we're going to have a seminar, we're going to have someone coming to talk about it, but the moment you raise a point, within that seminar, people start chuckling. I mean, I remember when I recently started about 3 years ago, and I made a comment, people, even HR in the office, were actually chuckling at the thing I was saying, but guys, this is exactly the point. If you're making fun of my statement addressing a serious issue, then how are we going to even properly address it and move forward from there? And I think we've still got a long way to go, particularly because there's so few women and there are many men. And I mean, I think especially for younger women, we experience that harassment a lot more because we get into the office, I'm the only one within the team that's under 30, everyone else is 40 plus, for example, and everywhere you go, whether it's meetings, you go abroad, whatever, you're mostly in a space with men, and people just think that it's nice to be nice to the lady in the room.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm sure some of you have very similar kind of stories. We're going to get into the panel just now. So Nosiphiwo, you are a CEO. I mentioned 60 billion rand. that's part of the responsibility you have. And obviously there's 6 billion, sorry. So there's a lot of expectations from young women as well. We've got young people as well, but old people, but experienced people here. What are the expectations of young black women of you, and how do you manage those expectations?
I guess for me is that what is problematic is that we need to get to a stage, I think, as a country and especially as a corporate, in moving past this thing of the first black woman, the first this, etc. And I think that what's critical to that is more representation of women in spaces where men have typically dominated, and more importantly, black women as well. And representation is important for me because I guess it shows that for those that are coming after me, that it can be done. And secondly, that we deserve a seat at the table as well. In my field, I'm the first black female CEO, and it is a bit of a double-edged sword because of the fact that in facing a lot of obstacles and getting to that point, I don't think that the depth of which, it is taken to get to this point lands with a lot of people, especially men. But I don't also think it is not only my responsibility to show them that, it's also their responsibility to have to unpack and understand that. And, it's difficult sometimes sitting in board meetings and being the only female, and then on top of that being the only black female, and kind of having to, one, voice your concerns without seeming as though, or question or voice matters that are important, without seeming as though you're being emotional. And what I often, someone had said this to me, a previous mentor of mine, where I worked for an investment bank for about 10 years, and she had said, be smart, and be smart around what you, what your obstacles are that you choose to fight. So don't always fight every battle. Not every battle is worth fighting. And secondly, when you are faced with an obstacle, be smart about how it is you're going to get what you want out of it. So I guess to give you a sense, and maybe an example is, I was at a investment bank for a number of years, and I was in a team where we had been tasked to gather quite a few clients to invest into property investments. And my background is property, so I've got a BSc in property studies, I've got incredible experience in property finance and development. And I guess, being in that sort of old boys club in terms of the ownership of some of those key relationships, a very big thing for me was in landing this one deal. So, it was very critical for me to set the tone to my team that it was a 500 million rand mandate at the time, and that I was seeking to obtain. And I guess I was, faced a lot of obstructions from 2 individuals, specifically Afrikaans males, in my team, to the point where I knew that in the one instance they had asked me to come into a meeting room to discuss this client. I said, sure, and my boss at the time, who was female, was actually not in the office, she was traveling for business. So I went to this meeting and I could clearly see this was a tag team. In WWF, when you see in the ring, you can see the 2 opponents, this is gonna be a tag team. So kind of armed, and I'm like, cool, what do you want to discuss? And they're kind of like, no, we're going to this meeting with this client, who is my client, and you're not going to be there because we think that we should run the meeting and we will come and give you feedback. So I said, okay, but that doesn't make sense because what the imperative word is say is my client, so why am I not there? And so it was, no, you're still new to this, and we will come back and give you the feedback, and just trust us, etc. So I was like, no, I'm going to make this meeting and I'm going to be there. So it got to a point, it got very heated, and then one of them initially, as I was leaving the room, was like, no, get back in the room. And I was like, no, and then he pushed me by my elbow into the room. So you can just imagine all the feels. Already your ears are hot and you're just like ready for war. So I kind of just said, listen, get out of my way, and I'm no longer discussing this with you guys, and understand the position, but I'm going to this meeting, and I left the meeting room shaking. So I called then my team lead at that time, and they had said actually that we find you completely condescending, and I think the famous my label at the company at that time was cheeky. I was very cheeky. And so I then speak to my boss, and then she said to me, she asked me 2 things. She's like, okay, cool, so this happened. She says, what do you want to get out of this? What is your key goal? And I said, well, getting this mandate. She goes, okay, cool. Secondly, is it important for you to raise this to HR or OD? I said, yeah, you know how this, the principal's not right, no one should touch me, etc., you know, all the typical etiquette. She said, okay, but what you need to do is that if you raise the matter to HR, know that you're not going to get number one, because you already will be determined the fact that you are very emotional. They're going to spin it because there were two of them that it didn't happen. So you need to be smart around what you want from it. And I mean, this is in no way condoning the abuse of women, by the way, and that is a disclaimer, but she's just stating, what do you want to get out of it? Then she said, draft an email to the MD, ask for a meeting, get them shook, get this meeting and request it, and I will be there. I said, great. We had a meeting with the MD herself and the two candidates. And then it was agreed, but she'd already told the MD what had taken place. And he then, very confidential, was like, sure. In the meeting, I walked away, not with 500 million rand, a billion. And then I was like, and I was then given the task of leading the task force for that client mandate going forward, and they then had to report to me on any other meetings that then had to take place for that. So, work smart, not hard, and always be sure that you detach, you know, and I don't believe this thing that women are emotional, because I think that our strength actually lies in our emotions, and our strength lies in our intuition, and that's my other key thing that I've managed to hone to get to this point, is that, you know, my team often laughs at me because I have meetings, you know, weekly, and then I go, okay, cool, I hear what you're saying to me, but my gut says this. And then they look at me and I'm like, my gut. And I'm like, go do this, do that, find out this, X, Y, Z. And then they come back and they're like, you actually were right. And so hone your intuition. That is actually the one advantage, I'll be frank in that women have over men. And that is an innate strength and power that each of us hold. And I think sometimes we put it aside in thinking that we have to be clinical in our approach and that we have to be men to do, you know, our jobs. And we don't need to be that. Women need to be women. And it has been found that, you know, in businesses where typically women are CEOs, from the point at which they are appointed, you know, the productivity levels, let me say the return on equity, is at a certain, you know, a percentage. A year after, when they then become themselves, they come back, and it's typically seen that at least increases by 15 to 20% more than a year ago when they start being themselves and they start honing in their resilience and capabilities and intuition. And that is our strength and innate power.
Do you think you can overestimate your intuition?
I don't think so. Well, I mean, I don't think you can overestimate it, because I mean, I think the one thing to that is, what is the consequence of overestimating? Failure, right? But why are we so scared of failure? And I think, you know, a lot of men are given that room to fail, but as women, we don't give ourselves the room to fail and start afresh. And you'll only know, I mean, you'll only know something is a good decision in hindsight. So, you know, you make a decision, and I often say to my team, and I'm pushing them, make a call. Be decisive and deliberate. And I mean, sometimes they get their backs up, and I'm like, but what is your call? Make a call. Be decisive, be deliberate, and always know your information. Always know your facts. So the only way to not overestimating it is knowing your facts. And your intuition is that additional layer. It's, you know, what I term as your fireball. And that's sort of your innate strength. And I was saying this to Wasanga earlier because, you know, when I was younger, I used to play Mario Brothers. And I'm sure if many of you played it, there are those fireballs that, you know, Mario and Luigi release. And you also release them in getting to certain levels, remember? So you go from level 1 to 4 and you move to the next level. And in my mind, you know, your fireballs are your innate strengths. And that is also in having courage. So your intuition and your courage, and in knowing that you leave yourself room to fail, are the strengths in which you can take forward in how you want to succeed.
All right, thank you, Nos. I'll move to Mmaphuthi. Mmaphuthi, do you think there's a place for femininity in sport?
Yes, there's definitely a place for femininity in sport, because there's a place for femininity in everything. I don't think it should be about sport or whatever it is. I think that, you know, if you were talking about just being authentic and stuff, I think that a good athlete is an athlete who is themselves. They know what things they need in terms of, I'm going to train, I'm going to eat right, whatever it is, but they are themselves. I think that if you look at globally, the athletes that people really like love and want to follow and want to know what they're doing. It's all the people who are really themselves. So when you see Serena Williams and she's posting her baby and she's like, oh my god, my mom loves Snapchat filters. You like that because her femininity is there, she's herself, and it becomes a real person for you. So I think that people should never shy away from who they are, whether it's about being feminine. I can give an example. In every job interview I've had, I've mentioned that I DJ. Some people will think, why would you tell a financial firm that you DJ? But there we go, that's really interesting. And it gives you kind of some character that you should, that they can understand about you as something that they want to have working with them. So I would say that whether it is your femininity or anything it is, never shy away from it because it's what takes you forward either way.
So great. We're going to be taking some questions for 20 minutes afterwards. And Fikiswa, just to get back to you, we've been having an ongoing discussion about boardrooms. You're at the peak of your sector in science and technology as a deputy director. How do you handle those discussions? And the boys' club that you mentioned, Nosiphiwo, and you've been, I won't say it was easy, it's your experience, you've mentioned it to all of us. Fikiswa, when you go into those boardrooms, you mentioned that you're one of the few young black women in those offices. How do you deal with that?
I think it's something that we've discussed already. Being resilient, sticking to your guns, being sure of your facts, knowing that this is me. I think that's the best thing that you can do. And I think it has actually helped me. I've got a variety of colleagues, and you work with a variety of people who have got very strong characters. But I think what I've always done whenever we go into that, yes, you see the strong character, but actually you acknowledge that strong character. I have a certain character, may not be as strong as the other people, but as long as you're sure of yourself, then I think that helps a lot. I've been involved in the boys' club for a very long time, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've managed to get to where I am. You know, I was thinking before coming here about how I have actually used a lot of the challenges that we face as women out there to my advantage. So, you know, you always, if you're the one young black female in the team, whenever there needs to be something and maybe there needs to be some cameras or senior government officials, I'll say, Fikiswa, go and do that. I mean, it's not nice because you know that that's why they're putting you there. But then I ask myself, okay, I can actually go and do it myself to say, well, these people are just using me. Or I can say, hey, yes, they're using me, but actually I need to use that opportunity as well to take advantage of that. And through the years, I think I've made good contacts, and I think that's one thing that is really useful, especially if you want to start your own business. I don't have my own business. I don't think that I've got character for that. And I mean, as was mentioned earlier, you can have a business, you can work. I don't think there's anything wrong with it too. I'm comfortable working. I don't think that I would manage owning a business. But you know, so you use, you make those networks, because after some time, you know, I look back at people and contacts that I've made maybe 8-10 years ago, and they're still very relevant, because as you grow as a person in your job, they themselves also grow in their jobs, in schooling or whatever, and actually you end up, you're growing together, but you know, that synergy keeps growing and growing.
We heard from Janine about the many different ways. I always mention that the moment you step outside of the house, it's difficult to be a woman. I appreciate that fact to so much extent. The fact that walking outside of your house is a challenge. The fact that I can jog after 6 o'clock is a privilege. Whereas you're terrified as hell. The fact that you can't take public transport, or the fact that even driving in your own car is dangerous because you're alone. So moving beyond that, it's been very amazing to hear these stories. And I want to ask about these boys' club specifically. And being consciously and unconsciously active in maintaining those structures is important. We heard from Pooh about how she spoke about a board member, fellow man. He did not understand. He said, I didn't know I was dominant. Fikiswa mentioned that. I didn't know I had a dominant personality either. So in that aspect, the nature of this discussion has been incredible. Thank you for allowing me to be a mediator as well. And we'll be taking some of those questions in the last 20 minutes or so. Oh, 10 minutes. Does anyone have a question?
We speak about these boys' clubs and stereotypes and all of these things, but we continue maintaining the status quo. What is stopping you as an entrepreneur, or you as a a boss to say, when next I am looking for a secretary or a PA, it has to be a male. Is there anything that is stopping you from doing that? Because unless we stop talking and start actually taking action and doing something, the action that we're taking towards wanting to break these barriers and stereotypes, we're going to remain talk shops forever, and nothing is going. This transformation that we're talking about, I'm not sure if we're looking at transformation in other spaces and not in our immediate spaces. We're expecting other people to transform and not ourselves, or what is happening. But my question is, what is really stopping you? Because nobody is born, no girl or woman or female is born a secretary or PA. What is stopping you from advertising for a secretary or PA's post and saying, I am looking for a male candidate? Thank you.
Look, I totally agree with you, and I think from my perspective, it's something that it's been very key to me, and there's actually nothing stopping us. And maybe I'll be frank, because in a lot of ways in which I have the ability to sort of ensure, maybe say, gender diversity and representation of women in terms of our workforce in my company, that's been a very critical thing. So, I mean, I grew up in a household where everyone did dishes. It's a girl's job. My brother cooked. We took out the rubbish bin, etc. So there was no stereotypical roles that were built into there. And I think what's a critical thing for me, especially when you discuss this term of boys' club, is taking the discussions that happen in those spaces back to the formal structure. So back to the boardroom, back to the engagement that you have with individuals that covers the space in which you operate. And why I say this is that it can be frustrating for me, especially in a role of seniority, to then have someone discuss a matter which was all discussed at a board meeting, and the next thing that, I was on the 9th green or whatever, and we discussed this and X, Y, Z, whatever, and then you get that feedback come back to you. But in owning and knowing your space, in as far as how I engage with that, is ensuring that the discussion comes back to that formal structure that exists. Because what is the point of then having a board that oversees decision making when the decisions are made outside of that? And I think a very critical thing for me, and that I enforced to my board in taking up my role, was that I would, one, have the decision making and who my team is and the authority to decide that. The input can be there from a board perspective, but I have the final decision. And that actually was written into my contract. I was very specific about that. And secondly, ensuring that all discussions that take place do not take place outside of the forum of which I have the ability to shape them. So, a case in point, I actually just advertised recently for an office assistant. And I actually made it quite open to any individual, gender-based, but it's just unfortunate that the majority of people that are in that space are women. That's just the reality which we're faced with. But I guess the critical thing is also shaping the culture within your organization around it being that there's no specific gender roles. My team members that report to me, as soon as we finish a meeting, I ask, the males that are in my team, please clear up these, glasses, help so-and-so to do this. If there's a meeting that we're having, they must chip in and go help make tea, etc. If, let's say, the tea lady, the person that assists us, isn't there. So it's about shaping the culture, it's about ensuring the discussions take back and come back to formal structures, and ensuring that we are decisive and deliberate in the way with which we engage critical things, because it starts with the small things that actually contribute to the economy. It's not the big decisions. If we're not shaping that culture and are being vocal around how, our responsibility in those spaces, then it'll never change.
In the same vein, Mmaphuthi, having to prove yourself, competency and self-critique in that aspect, do you find that you constantly have to prove yourself in that environment as well? And just linking it back to the discussion about boys clubs and creating the right foundations to be able to say that, hey, I can say to you right now, I support women, I'm whatever, but what am I doing tangibly? Where are these guys?
Yeah, I think that you constantly have to prove yourself. But for me, the guys must also prove themselves. So if I'm in the team and I'm working at this reps and I have to be safe, etc., then for me it's like I'm comfortable to call out a colleague who I think is slacking. Why must I be working at this rate and he's not, right? Because that's when you're challenging the boys' club. Because facts are the thing that matters, right? So a manager can't make up a story about a guy who's not doing his work because they have to come with facts as well. So if I'm saying, look, I had to complete this and this and this and this, that guy was given a different timeline or he was given this, why? They don't have a reason other than, oh, okay, I guess, yeah, we spoke about it, whatever. So you have to challenge based on the facts, number one. But I think that always look at it in that, no one can ever, if you're constantly working at a level where you are, I think I sent you the twin that would say, be so good that you want to hire yourself, right? So no one can ever, if I know that I'm working as hard as I would hire myself, damn, I'm so good, I'll pay myself everything. Then everyone's going to be like, yes, okay, I know that I would also want to hire somebody like that. And I can't challenge them, they can never fault you really other than maybe a mistake that you make, which you're allowed to make. You're always allowed to make mistakes, especially when you're working in a corporate because the structures are there for you to make mistakes to learn. It has to be a learning curve. So I think you never have to be scared of making mistakes, but you must be able to say that I know that I'm working as hard as I can and being competent. That's the main thing. Because no one can argue with your competency. That's what's going to get you a promotion. That's going to make sure that everyone goes, yeah, that's a good point in the meeting. And that's what really works for you in that space. And not to worry too much about like, okay, cool, I'm over having to prove myself. Because if you go into that, you're going to go into a very dark hole because there's lots of more things that you have to deal with as well.
Vicky, I think I've heard it twice a few times about being smart and pretty. Is there really anything wrong with being attractive? There isn't. I feel like Fortune said, why do you have to be labeled, why is she intelligent and pretty? Don't you find that statistically speaking, the more attractive you are, or the more good looking you are, the more well presented you are, the more successful you will be? It's a comment, yeah. It's pretty beautiful people actually succeed faster than the average person.
Yeah, look.
So I just want to say, basically what I'm saying, it's not a question. It's like we need to embrace our sensuality or our beauty or the big boobs or the big bum, or if you want to go and have, I don't know, whatever manicures you like or fake hair, it shouldn't be seen as an obstacle. I don't know, do you hear my point or not?
Look, I think I hear your point, and I think, yeah.
Yeah, because it's been so many twice about being beautiful and...
I didn't hear Farah's discussion or presentation. Look, there's nothing wrong with being pretty, and there's nothing wrong with being beautiful. But I think that to deem women to only look at women for the aesthetic is problematic for me. And it's problematic because I believe that we are so multidimensional and layered. And insofar as the struggles that we still have to deal with around having seats at the table, economic equality, pay, equality, there are so many other things that we have to deal with before we discuss the pretty. So in as far as for me, I'm a mother, so and there's something very key. What I do think sometimes we underestimate is the womanness that we bring to something. And before I took this role, my chairman of my board, because I've been on the board for the past 4 years, and when it was offered to me, and I was still debating, whether I could take on the challenge, whether, I was ready for it, and there were, people in my front row that were just gunning for me to take this. And it came with fear, and I was faced with fear, and I'll be honest in that. And my chairman came to me, he said to me, you've already started the hardest job in your life, which is being a mother. This is going to be nothing. A man said that to me. Then I actually had to reflect to myself around the fact that what has actually got me so shook that I can't take this role. Because any man who probably may have been less qualified than me and probably mediocre would have taken this like this. So I just feel that there are so many other discussion points and aspects that we have to deal with before we discuss the aesthetic. But I'll wait for my panelists. Yeah. Thank you.
I think the reason we don't, we keep referring to, being smart and pretty is that you walk into a room, people don't know would not necessarily know who you are, and then you start talking. But you walk in there, you're good looking, you catch their attention, and then what comes out of your mouth, like, oh wow, she's actually smart. But then the question is, but what were you expecting? You're coming into a meeting, so if it was a man that's walking in here, you wouldn't be thinking, oh wow, I wonder if he's clever or not. He's so handsome or he's not. But you're there and you listen to what they're saying. And so it's very difficult not that it's difficult, I don't think that we need to separate, because they do tend to go hand in hand. Whether, people will look at you as, oh, you're pretty, you're probably whatever, but the more, it always comes secondary than, your capabilities and your competence.
If that's all, I'd like to thank everyone for their time. I'd like to thank everyone also for the information that was shared. It was an incredible discussion. It was incredible engagement, all point just a discussion. I learned a lot personally. I don't know about everyone else here. And once again, thank you to Sanlam, thank you to Scoop. He's the MD of Consumer Council. He's put himself at the back of this, but this is all his concept, and I'm going to do this to him. So please say a few words.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Hello guys, thank you so much. Like, it means so much to me and to us as well, the panelists, for that you actually made the time on a weekday to come and learn and share with us. Thank you to the panelists, Nosiphiwo, Mmaphuthi, Fikiswa, Janine. Are they named already? But it's been an incredible response. We're going to have a lot more of these in 2018 on different topics, different sectors. I'm hoping to see some of your faces there again. But I've learned a lot today, especially from as being a man. So it's nice to actually be engaging in the conversation of what matters, the challenges, and opportunities for women in workspace and personal lives. That I can learn and unlearn some things as well as a man. So again, thank you very, very much, and we're looking forward to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.